comic page, but I thought today we'd do another quick tip, because we're about to do the dot shaders on this, the screen tones. And you can see I've got a tones layer here. And the screen tones that I use are a special set that are called beat tones shaders. And which you have to get these separately. It's about $20. Hang on for a second, let me share my screen. Okay, this is TrueGritTextureSupply.com. I don't know if you can see that. TrueGritTextureSupply.com. And you just go to the front page and you choose for Procreate. And there are all kinds of different brushes that you can get for Procreate. And I really like this particular provider. There's other ones you can get, like Creative Market and Creative Fabrica and other places where you can get brushes. There's all kinds. And there's, by the way, there's my Rusty Nib brushes as well. But let me show you, the ones I'm talking about are these right here, the beat tones, which are distressed halftone brushes. And you can see it's $20. But what they do is this sort of halftone screen tone effect. And they do it a number of different ways, including dots, lines, and diagonals, and even cross-hatching. So it's a very cool retro effect. I think they even include some of the paper textures as well. But let me show you how they're also used. I happen to have, this is what really influenced me, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is a Peter Laird drawing, and you can see that he used originally duo shade paper, which is, it has the tones baked into the paper, but you have to like paint it with a chemical to reveal the tones. There's another type of analog which is just screen tones, like zip tone, where you have, it's like a translucent sticker that you apply to the surface of the paper. And these have been in use for a really long time. Let me see if I'm recording this correctly. This is Mickey Mouse from 1938, I believe, I think. And let's just click on this one, and you can see, if you look very closely, I don't know what the resolution on YouTube is, screen tones are in use on this darkened panel, but not just on darkened panels, it's used even on regular panels, just to bring up a different shade other than black and white. You got gray. So, and it's used pretty judiciously throughout the composition. And on night scenes, it was also used. So look at this night scene right here. This one's really interesting to me because it's a double lighting. He's got a shadow here, cast shadow, but then there's the other shadow here. But the screen tones are used throughout, and then they're kind of cut away for the light. All right. So how are they used? Let me go back to, going back to my webcam. Here it is, this page. So one of the first tips is put your tones all in one layer. I don't know if you can see this, but if you zoom in, you'll notice I have a special layer just for tones. It goes underneath the bubbles, but above the ink. You can try different configurations, and there's no reason that you have to have just one layer for screen tones. You could have multiple layers. Oof, let me bump this up a little bit. One thing I've tried to do is be consistent. So this entire comic, it only uses the diagonal lines style of screen tone. Whereas when I was doing Book of Ruin, I used the dot kind of screen tone. Let me go back to that one for just a moment. Well, here's a page, and you can see the dots, right? This is done with this is what you really get with the beat tones, by the way. It's not even, it's distressed on purpose. Right? Okay. Let's go back to this one. Alright, so we want to do a scene in the dark, but we want to show the ability of light. And you have a built, by the way, if you don't want to buy it, there is a way you can get a certain screen tone effect out of Procreate. It's not very good though. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to use it for a second. I'll just probably erase it. On your standard Procreate, if you haven't installed anything else, you probably have something called textures right here, and it has a bunch of these goofy textures that are on there. One of those textures is called decimals, I think. There it is right here. It looks like dots. And when you choose that, look over here, you can see your dots get really small or really big. You want them really small. The problem is, first of all, they're too close to each other and they're uniform in size. So when I put that, I mean, it's obviously not a very good screen tone. Let's make it small. You can get a screen tone-like effect. It's just not very tuned to the medium, right? So one way to do it is you could lower your opacity, or I want a big enough. I would want like a big enough thing there. There's probably a way you could design it, and obviously they designed it for the B-tones, but that's one way of doing it. But I really recommend you just spend the $20. It's $20. It's not that expensive, and you'll use it for a lot. So let me go back to my stuff. I'm in the right layer. We're rejecting these tones. We're going to the beat tones. Okay, now the second thing when you're using these tones is you have two choices. You have beat tones classic, which are just straight in, laid in beat tones. And the ones I'm using are the diagonal line. Where is it? It's this line, but it's not this line. It's a line going from left to right. So if you look at this one, this line is going from, it's left high, right low, but I've got them the opposite direction. So I want this one, the 45-degree line right here. And let's say I wanted to and I wanted to make this bigger. It doesn't affect the size of the lines as it goes through. And because this is on its own layer, it's not covering up or hurting the artwork that's on there. And I can just cut it away with my eraser tool here in a second. I want this to be one of the brighter areas in this dark area. He's going to be more in the dark because he's hiding behind this wall. But we're going to use a different tone for him. You just chop it away with your eraser. And it's kind of like you're just razoring off the edges of it. Now they give you different concentrations. You may have noticed that there's bunches of lines there. 10%, 30%, 50%, 70%, 90%. So you can do a gradient. Let's say I want to make it a little bit darker at the edges here. I can go to 30%. And you can see how it's darkening it up. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see it. And because of the beat tones magic, and I don't know how else to describe it, it never has a problem lining up, or it rarely has a problem lining up with whatever you laid down before. Now if you're laying down tones and you aren't careful about making your tones line up with what you had before, you can get something called a moire effect, or a moire effect, and which looks a little bit bad. It looks like it's kind of dizzying, and it looks like it creates a strange pattern as you zoom out. You may have noticed on my look at how it does this sort of, I don't know if you can see that at all. If you've gone to my Instagram page and looked at my pages that have the tones, as they shrink down, they do get that moire effect. Anyways, hang on. I do kind of want to have her feet in shadow, but I want to make sure I get all the background first. Oops. So we've got that. And this is kind of, let's make it a little bit darker over here. We'll make this down to 30% again. The light sources you have to identify are, I want her little antenna things to glow. I want like a little halo around her head, but this is what's actually glowing. And then same thing around his eyes. He has like these glowing eyes when it's dark. You can use this tone trick to mimic both a shadow, but also a color. So for example, I don't know if I've even done it over here. I did a little bit over here. This chest plate thing that he's got is meant to be a different color than the rest of his body here. So we can actually go in and let's say if we've done everything 10 and 30%, I can go to 50 or even 70%. Let's do 70%. And I can change the color. I don't think that looks good though, so let's take that back out. Alright, so that's one way of doing it. You also have another option, that's the classic. We also have the shaders. The shaders are the same thing, but they're smaller, they're even tighter, and they're pressure sensitive. So if you looked at this particular one, you notice how I've got all this kind of distressed look in here. That was done with adjusting your pressure sensitivity. So let's do some shading on this. That's 45 degrees right here. Let's do some shading on this back panel back here. And you can tell I can, if I go in hard, I get a darker line, but if I go in soft, it could be a softer line. Now you may have noticed also, this is actually going the opposite direction. So you might want that, or you might not want that, but I'm going to just back out all of these edits. You can even put these on a different layer. Let me take a look at my... Oh, I was using the dot shader anyways, that was dumb. Where's my line shader? It's this one is the one. Alright. As your figures get smaller, remember the lines in the shader do not get any smaller, so you might end up with, this doesn't look as good to me, like when it's over here like this. So this might have been a better candidate for shading rather than... In fact, let's do that. So let's shade him instead of the... So you notice these lines are a bit closer together, and it's based on the sensitivity of how hard I press my my stylus. And when I say how hard, it's like really light. Even the harder, there's no strength going into this at all. It's just to get a slightly more intense look. But it's still very loose. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, now what do we do over here? Well, I think these are the right size, so we can stick with, instead of using the shader, we can use the classic. But we got to do something about this figure back here. So we want to make it different than what's back there. We're going to make it darker. Let's go all the way to 50%. And you notice I'm leaving a little bit of white on the outside here. And I'm not going to do the figure at all just yet. So we still want them to pop, so what we want them to do, in this case, And I'll probably have to go through and erase a nice little white outline for him. I'm trying to create this suspense where the readers can see him, but the characters in the story can't see him yet. Alright, now I gotta clean it up. I left a huge mess. All right. There we go. All right, now we've created a nice flat outline. Let's go ahead and make this rim light right around the edge of this area right here, and a little bit here. Okay. Well, we could go harder, but I think we're popping them out right pretty good at this point. And now we're going to back it down. I think we used 50%. Let's back it down to 10% again. But this time we're going to do just shading on the figure. Because we already did the harder shading, he now stands out from the foreground just a little bit. Now look, he's got recesses and little, like this arm is in front of his chest. So we have to create another layer of shadows in order to capture that. All right, so we're going to do this light here. And now let's go a little bit darker. We've got it. We were at 50. Let's go to 70. All right. We're going to do a shadow for him behind. And we're starting to run into a problem. I'm overlapping onto him, which is, remember the problem we had to clean up on the edges here? But what we can do is create another layer. That way it's easy to control where the shadow ends up. In fact, we can make it even darker. We can do it darker down here. Make it maybe darker over there. And then it's just a matter of erasing on this layer without touching the other layer. I still got some things I gotta fix over there. So control your layers and use a decent texture set. Now this isn't the only texture set in the world. There are other ones. You might choose a different one other than the True Grit ones. Retro Texture Supply has a nice one. I use their gouache brushes, which I think are great. Or you might find another that you just like better. And that's cool. That's totally cool. Alright, so it went up onto him here. Now it looks like he's kind of coming out of the shadows a little bit more. Okay. Hopefully everyone's seeing the possibilities here. With the texture brush. It will transform the look and feel of your art to something that looks a little bit more analog and realistic, which is kind of what we want, right? We want things to look like that. It's the trade-off with going digital, is you lose the analog look, which is more pleasant by far. Some people really like the digital look. I am not a fan. There we go. Now, my one problem here is I need dialogue, so that's probably a good topic for another time. Let me fix this right here. And that's it for right now. All right, please like, follow, and subscribe, and there will be more comics every day. I'm still going to be working on this, and this page is probably going to get done pretty quickly. Because I still have to do maybe a little bit of shading on these characters. Where am I? Maybe a little bit of shading on these characters. But I have to do the dialogue. And then tomorrow's video, it will be another comic video, but we're going to use it as an opportunity to talk about setting up your page for printing in Procreate, and how you should set it up from the beginning. What dimensions should you choose and all that stuff. And once again, I think the way I do it may not be the way that you eventually settle on how you want to do it, which is fine. Everyone kind of figures out their own way. But what I am going to show you is something that I know works. It works pretty well. Alright, that's enough for now. Talk to you later.